Let's move on from that story to the story which is our top focus today, because moments from now, Joe Biden will take oath as the 46th President of the United States. Mr. Biden will be administered his oath of office by the U.S. Chief Justice at the western front of the U.S. Capitol, in the same spot which witnessed violence by Donald Trump's supporters exactly 2 weeks ago. Besides Mr. Biden, Kamala Harris will be sworn in as the first woman and also of Indian American origin Vice President of the United States. After the oath ceremony, Mr. Biden will deliver his inaugural address at around 10:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Remember, those are live pictures now coming in from the United States, where Mr. Biden will also become the oldest president of the United States. He turned 78 in November. There he is with his wife and family, and Kamala Harris as well. Remember, the ceremonies have been scaled down because of the COVID pandemic. The number of people expected are much less than they normally would be for an inauguration. About 1,000 supporters in all are expected to be there, and a very small number of people are part of the VVIP entourage who will be part of this inaugural ceremony. Let's first get reactions from the United States. I'm joined by KATHRINE, correspondent at the Voice of America. Also joining me is AVIROOK Sen, who's been tracking this election in the United States. KAFURA, Assistant Director, Public Opinion and Foreign Policy at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs at Columbia University, is also with us. And Daniel Benjamin, President, American Academy, is with us. Thank you all very much for joining me at this moment. KATHRINE, let's get first your comments on what to expect. KATHRINE, a scaled down ceremony is what we are being told at the moment.
Absolutely, and I've already seen that when I was coming in this morning. It looks very different than the other presidential inaugurations I've covered. Usually the National Mall here in Washington, D.C. is teeming with tens of thousands of people. There's always a very festive atmosphere. That is not happening today. It's a very somber atmosphere. We know that there are thousands of flags on the National Mall representing the people in all of the United States who will not be able to be here because of the coronavirus pandemic. And as you can see behind me, it's a much scaled down audience on the steps of the U.S. Capitol who will actually be there to witness President-elect Biden taking the oath of office this time around. We also know that the previous president will not be there to hand over the reins of power. We watched President Trump depart in the Marine One helicopter just a few hours ago. He will not be there, but Vice President Pence will accompany then President Biden through some of the inauguration festivities. But there's not a sense that there's a transfer of power in the way there has been in previous presidential inaugurations. That will be a little bit different. We'll still have celebrations. We'll still have entertainers singing. We'll have a virtual celebration this evening, but very much scaled down in the sense of the times.
So just give us a sense, though, KATHRINE, what to expect over the next couple of hours. The president gets inauguration, is about the formal inauguration about just over an hour from now. Will that then be followed by virtual celebrations? Some of the singers, I'm told, or some of the television acts will be virtually?
Yes, exactly. So the very first major event we'll see is in about an hour when Vice President-elect Kamala Harris is sworn into office, followed shortly after by the oath of office for President-elect Biden. Then we can expect to hear about a 20 to 25-minute speech, we're being told, in which the president will talk about national unity, really emphasizing those themes after the riot we saw at the U.S. Capitol just 2 weeks ago. Then we'll have a virtual parade and then a virtual musical entertainment celebration this evening hosted by some of the top entertainers here in the United States. So it is something that everyone in the United States will be able to join in, but it'll be joining in virtually.
Very interesting. That's what COVID times does. KAFURA, is that the only break with the past that you see? You've got the president who's departed, Donald Trump, choosing not to attend the ceremony. We're told only Vice President Mike Pence will attend. Does that in a way reflect perhaps the acrimony which we've seen in the last few months between the Trump administration and the incoming Biden administration?
Well, I think it certainly reflects the attitudes of soon-to-be former President Trump and his administration. Clearly, he's felt quite isolated these last several days as he's been impeached for the second time, now a record in American history. However, I don't know that that same sense of division extends further into some of the Senate and House leadership across the aisle. You'll see today that members of both parties are seated here at the inauguration. I do think there's an effort from House leadership, both Republican and Democratic, and Senate leadership, again Republican and Democratic, to demonstrate that the United States can come together after events that really shocked not only Americans but the world, and of course were particularly shocking to members of Congress themselves. Having to run for your life and hide in a bunker is not an experience they are going to forget anytime soon. And I do think it's forced them to rethink a bit how they're going to approach this inauguration. That is not obviously the only difference, but it's certainly one of them.
Let me try and see if we can connect to Daniel Benjamin also, who's with us. Jonathan Wachtel, Global Affairs Analyst, is with us. Jonathan, this is a time that President Biden, or incoming President Biden, has spoken of a time of unity and healing for America. Do you see the inauguration in that sense being part of this symbolic effort after what happened 2 weeks ago of an America finally trying to sort of look beyond the divisions and try to present a united front? Jonathan? AVIROOK, would you agree with that, as someone who's traced this US election for the last 3 months, this extremely divisive, acrimonious election? Do you see today as a day when perhaps a day of healing in a way, a day of unity for the people of the United States?
To be honest, Rajdeep, I feel the last 4 years, right from I was about to come to that, President Trump's inaugural speech as he took over office was, the line was American carnage. Today's line is likely to be American healing. And in a way, Joe Biden set the tone last night where he mourned and he remembered collectively for all of America the 400,000 people who have lost their lives to COVID. So in a tragedy like this, there's also the opportunity to come together. I think that's the tone he struck. And it's interesting that, that it was done at the monument, and it was done by the pool of reflection, as he called it. And this is a time for America to introspect, to reflect, and eventually heal. And I think they have the right kind of man for that job. Joe Biden is universally known across party lines or support bases as somebody with genuine empathy. This is, empathy and Donald Trump were not friends. It's come to that point now where this is the only option, in fact, for the Americans. Donald Trump will have to say, Colbert put it very well, don voyage, please leave, finally, and let America breathe again.
I just want to, for a moment, though, play what Donald Trump said. Remember, Donald Trump, just a short while ago, gave what is being seen as his farewell address as the US President. Significantly, Donald Trump said, I will be back, almost suggesting that he is not giving up on becoming, let's say, President of the United States in 2024. There's been much speculation as to what Mr. Trump will do now. Will he go back to business? Will he go back into media? Or will he go back just to playing golf? But first, listen in to what Donald Trump said, and then we'll get more reactions.
It is my greatest honor and privilege to have been your president. I will always fight for you. I will be watching, I will be listening, and I will tell you that the future of this country has never been better. I wish the new administration great luck and great success. I think they'll have great success. They have the foundation to do something really spectacular. And again, we put it in a position like it's never been before, despite the worst plague to hit since, I guess you'd say, 1917, over 100 years ago. And despite that, the things that we've done have been just incredible, and I couldn't have done it without you. So just a goodbye. We love you. We will be back in some form.
We will be back in some form, says the outgoing U.S. President. Daniel Benjamin, President of American Academy, what does that mean? Does that mean that we haven't seen the last of Donald Trump in public life?
I think it would be impossible for Donald Trump to ever exit or even pretend as if he's really exiting public life. The man ticks to be seen, to be written about, to be photographed, to be videoed. So he will undoubtedly want to continue to dominate the headlines and the media coverage. Without his Twitter platform, he will have a considerable challenge in doing so. And he's also headed for some very, very serious litigation, as well as very large financial problems. So my assumption is that he will try to continue to play a kingmaker's role in the Republican Party. He's likely to want to take revenge against some of the people who he felt betrayed him when it came to impeachment. But he is going to have some very serious problems, and he faces the possibility of being barred by the Congress from ever serving in government again if he is convicted of impeachment. And, you know, there's a rebellion going on in the Republican Party, or a civil war going on in the Republican Party. So that's going to have to play itself out.
You know, we're just getting these live images that are coming in at the moment from Washington, D.C. Kathrine Gibson, correspondent of the VOA, just for our viewers here in India, just describe this ceremony as it's taking place. As you've been saying, it's a scaled-down ceremony, but it still is symbolically very important. This is the traditional U.S. inauguration ceremony. Former presidents are there. We are told George W. Bush will be there, Bill Clinton is there, Barack Obama is there. So an element of continuity with former Republican and Democratic Party members there present at the moment. We also have at this moment Craig KAFURA, Assistant Director, Public Opinion. Craig, this is a significant moment in a sense for America in symbolic terms, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is. This is obviously the end of one administration and the beginning of another. It is also a day of many firsts. Kamala Harris will be the first woman to be Vice President of the United States, the first woman of African American and South Asian descent to become Vice President of the United States. We will have for the first time a second gentleman rather than a second lady. And in addition, this marks the first time, as many commentators have noted today, the first time that the United States has not experienced a fully peaceful transfer of power. So it's an interesting day for many reasons. It's also a day that many Americans are looking toward the future with a mixture of both hope and fear. If you look at public opinion polls, Americans are very, very concerned about the COVID pandemic, now that it's killed more than 400,000 Americans, and it's their top priority for this incoming administration. And they're going to have really their hands full. They have had a lot of problems in getting the outgoing administration to cooperate with them on transition issues, and I think they're looking forward today to figuring out just how big of a mess they've gotten themselves into.
You know, we have images coming in of former President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton walking in. Remember, of course, Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump famously 4 years ago. Bill Clinton, two-time U.S. President, he and his wife Hillary Clinton are among the special invitees for this inauguration that's taking place at this moment. There's also a strong India connection, and that's not just Kamala Harris. There are about 20 Indian Americans in some form or the other who will be part of the new administration. SEEMA SIROHI joins me at the moment. SEEMA, you're there in Washington, D.C. Is there a sense that the Biden administration will therefore perhaps reach out to India in a more significant manner than the Trump administration did, or will issues like trade in particular, possibly human rights violations, remain contentious issues with a Biden administration?
Hello. See, the thing is, the number of Indian Americans in the Biden administration is very significant, no doubt, but they're Americans first and Indian Americans second. So they will be basically pursuing the policies laid out by the president. Their presence in the administration doesn't necessarily mean that India will have an easier time or a harder time. It will be up to the Indian government and Indian diplomats to make their case to the administration. As for human rights, yes, this administration has said that they want to bring human rights to the center of American foreign policy. So we can expect some questions on that, but counterbalancing that is the whole question about China and Biden administration's policy towards China. So yesterday there was some confirmation hearings, and we got kind of an early indication as to what the incoming Secretary of State and incoming Defense Secretary think about China. They both noted that it is the most significant challenge they face. So as far as that is concerned, the hope is that they will continue with the Trump administration policy of the Indo-Pacific, in which India is an extremely important element and a pillar of the Quad strategy, etc.
We're getting more pictures there coming in, live pictures coming in from Washington, D.C. A short while ago, you saw former President George W. Bush and his wife there, Laura Bush, also part of the contingent of former presidents who are there, along with the Obamas and the Clintons. I'm joined by Stephen GOLUB, international affairs expert. Stephen, this is a moment in a way which for a large part of the world is a moment of relief. Let's be honest. There's a large part of the world which says, thank God Donald Trump isn't there. Do you get a sense that from an American perspective, on the other hand, this is a divided states of America, that you've got the strong Trump supporters and you've got those who are relieved that Donald Trump isn't there at the moment, that is really the main challenge before Joe Biden, which is to bring the healing touch to a country where the COVID pandemic continues to rage at the moment?
Well, certainly, and thanks for having me. I do think, yes, the country's very divided. In terms of pure number of votes, 7 million more Americans voted for Joe Biden than Donald Trump, which is somewhat significant, but yes, very divided. However, I think it's important to emphasize that a big source of the division is Donald Trump himself. He handled his presidency in the way no previous president has. The fact that he's not at this inauguration is an indication of his inability to recognize democracy in action. It wasn't until the very end that he actually agreed that, yes, Joe Biden is the incoming president. We've reached the end of very arguably the worst presidency in our country's history in terms of Donald Trump trying to undermine our country by appealing especially to white nationalist sentiments, which would lead to great discrimination against Indian Americans, any people of color, and also in terms of even the way he handled COVID, the virus crisis, through dishonesty and incompetence about what was going on, claiming it wasn't a big problem, telling people that even face masks weren't really necessary, saying it was allowing them to think that it was a symbol of freedom not to wear the masks, and there's a good case to be made that tens or maybe even 100,000 or more Americans are dead because of Donald Trump's inaction, incompetence, and dishonesty in handling this. So yes, there's division in the country, but there's also great relief in a lot of quarters, including in some Republican Party quarters, that this man is gone. He was in his own way as bad a plague as COVID has been to the United States. And his being gone, and Joe Biden, competent, experienced person coming into the office, is clearly on balance a great change for the better here.
We're getting images as you speak of Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, and as you can see from the applause, remain extremely popular. Barack Obama, of course, now out with a new biography, part 1 of his 2 volumes on his presidential years. And in a way, this is, as we've been saying, a moment for connecting the past to the present. Many believe that that's the best way to look at what's happening in the United States at the moment. Would you agree with that, Daniel Benjamin, that this is an opportunity for America to connect the past to the present? The last 25 years of US presidents, all there on one stage except for Donald Trump, which in a way suggests that Mr. Trump was the outlier. The others represent continuity.
I absolutely believe that in the feelings of many Americans, this is seen as a resumption, a restoration, if you will, of serious governance, of impartial justice, of state of law, of treating all Americans equally, of government that is not meant to be particularly profitable for one man or one small group surrounding that man. So I think that the previous speaker, Stephen Golub, was exactly right in the sense that there is a heavy sigh of relief being breathed across the country, and I think that there are an awful lot of hopeful people right now. I do think it's important to underscore that no president has been inaugurated amid such difficulties, certainly since Franklin Roosevelt in 1933 and possibly since Abraham Lincoln in 1861. And the economic and health problems that Joe Biden will face are enormous. And what's more is the hard work that he will have to do to restore America's reputation in the world will be very, very considerable and will be very time-consuming in an administration where there are so many overwhelming challenges. So I do think that restoration is a good prism to look at this through, but I don't think that anyone really feels like we are where we were in 2016 because of so many dramatic events that have intervened.
Family members of the Biden family are there. Remember, Joe Biden has gone through a lot of personal tragedy, lost his son to cancer, also has lost his wife and daughter to in a car crash many years ago. So he's gone through personal tragedy. His family there with him on what is an occasion that many believe he's been waiting for. Remember, he first contested for a US presidential election way back in 1988. Then, of course, in 2008, lost out to Barack Obama and became his vice president instead. Craig KAFURA, do you also agree that this is a day of restoration? Is that the word to use today? I think Joe Biden suggested that this is a start of a new America. He spoke of a reset. Is this about reset, restoration?
I think Biden will come into office with half of a view toward restoration and half of a view toward creating something new. On the one hand, I think there's definitely a sense that the administration wants to get back to just a normal order of politics, a politics in which there are not multiple catastrophes going on every day without constant scandals, simply establishing a federal government that can effectively execute on its priorities and to get the country back into a more normal situation than we're in now. At the same time, I don't think that the Democratic Party or Joe Biden is really looking to return back to the 2000s or the 1990s in terms of how politics are done. There's clearly a sense of learning from the Obama administration's experience. If you look at the number of things that Biden has teed up to kick off on the first day, both in terms of executive orders, in terms of legislation he plans to put before Congress, they are trying to get an awful lot done as quickly as possible. because not only are the scale of challenges they face really unusual, but they know that they have limited time. In that first year, they need to get as much done as they can. Once the second year of their administration rolls around, Congress will be looking at the midterm elections and focused on that. And beyond that, there's a good chance that the Democrats will lose their House majority and their Senate majority in those midterm elections, as usually happens.
How easy is that going to be to do this reset, to do the restoration, Stephen Golub? Because at the end of the day, the Republicans still control the Senate. They did make some gains in the House of Representatives in November. So do you believe that Joe Biden will have the kind of leeway once he's in office? Is life going to become more difficult? Will he have a very brief honeymoon period given the tough circumstances in which he takes over?
He may have a brief honeymoon period. One thing I want to emphasize, though, in response to your question, is that the Republicans do not control the Senate. The Democrats do. It's a 50-50 split. Under our Constitution, the Vice President, Kamala Harris, will be the tie-breaking vote, which means the Senate is controlled by the Democrats, and that's a crucial matter moving forward for Biden. He'll still have, because of Senate rules and all sorts of other matters, he'll still have some very tough going. He may have a brief honeymoon period. I'm not sure that's going to last very long at all. One thing about just this notion of restoration that I want to emphasize as well is that it's a restoration of a presidency that believes in democracy, which is what we've had throughout our history until Donald Trump, who through some explicit statements and through many actions really was undermining our democracy, and if he'd been reelected, could have put us on a real authoritarian path, not actually abolishing elections, but undercutting the judiciary, the rule of law, independent institutions, the free press, everything along the lines of what he tried to do to some extent in his first term, but with much more momentum and power in his second term. So in a sense, this election was about democracy or anti-democracy. Democracy thankfully won, and moving forward, we're going to see a restoration of a presidency that actually stands for and respects democracy.
You know, we're getting images of Mike Pence, Vice President to Donald Trump, and someone whom Donald Trump thought betrayed him in the last few days by not standing by him, particularly after the Capitol Hill violence. Daniel Benjamin, you're going to leave us in a short while. I just want to get a sense from you. How will history judge the Trump administration?
I confess I think it's going to judge the administration quite harshly. Donald Trump is the only president to have ever been impeached twice. The number of indictments that have been leveled against Trump associates or government officials is staggering. There is a headline in one of the American publications today saying that the Biden transition people feel that they've been stymied in the transition, and they're waiting to find out what looms when they get into the offices and what they're going to find out. You know, the last president to not attend the inauguration of his successor was Andrew Johnson, who before Richard Nixon was the only one who'd ever been impeached. He too was not removed from office, but he is usually considered at the very bottom of the list of American presidents, and I think he and Donald Trump will be fighting it out. It's very hard for me to see what historians will look at in the Trump administration and find worthy.
You know, that's an interesting piece of trivia that you've also given us there, that Donald Trump is only the second U.S. president not to attend the inauguration of his successor. And that perhaps just reflects why the Trump administration, in a way, is today being seen by large sections of American society as outliers, as those who, in a way, broke rules and conventions, and that, in a sense, may well define this Trump administration. AVIROOK, from an Indian perspective again, do you think that India must welcome the exit of the Trump administration? I remember an Indian-American scholar telling me a few weeks ago that the world will sleep better without Donald Trump in the White House. Do you agree with that?
Completely. And this is true. I mean, I think if we just look beyond just Indo-US relations and things like that, if we look at core values, I mean, India and the US are the world's greatest democracies, right? Here was a man trying to constantly undermine, undercut, and basically was on his way to abolishing democracy in the United States. What he has done, especially over the last year, is undermine faith in the whole process of an election, pursued this absurd and completely crazy line well after having lost resoundingly, gone to court 60 times or more and lost, and yet as a last stand tried to incite his supporters to storm the Capitol building, and supporters who threatened to hang his vice president, who was in that building at the time.
Sure, but the worry is, of course, that happened just exactly a couple of weeks ago. So it's all too recent, and therefore the wounds, in a way, of the Trump administration, or the scars that are left, have yet to be healed. And one of the challenges for the Biden administration will be to heal those deep divides that exist at the moment in American society. Do you therefore see, SEEMA, SIROHI, this administration focusing on America first, rather than looking to build bridges with the world? Do you see the first priority for this government first to get America on track, particularly with the COVID pandemic still raging in the United States? India and other parts of the world will be low priority, barring China?
See, there's no question that the domestic problems are so immense as this new administration comes in, that controlling the pandemic will be on top of the to-do list. But that doesn't mean that people who are in charge of looking at foreign policy and implementing them are not going to do their job. So I think the American bureaucracy and the American system is large enough and competent enough that it can do two things at the same time. What I would like to say on the end of the Trump presidency is this. It's very easy to focus on one person and to denounce him, and he absolutely needs all the denunciation that is coming his way. But I think he was the symptom of a disease, well, not the disease itself. The divisions in America are very, deep, and due to many, many reasons, one of which is, the job losses and things like that. So while we can say that the agenda now is unity and healing, it is going to be a very, very tough job for Biden because of the very narrow majorities in both the House and the Senate. In terms of focus on foreign policy, as I was saying earlier, there is no indication that they won't get on the job from day one. National security...
Let me press that. When you say that they will get on the job on day one, I just want to get a priority list. Craig KAFURA, do you see China being at the top of the list of a Trump administration, of a Biden administration, in the manner that it was for Trump? For Trump, it seemed that he was in this constant war, in a way, of sorts with China. Do you see a decoupling taking place now between national security and trade, in particular when it comes to the American administration in dealing with China, that China will be seen as a partner possibly in trade, even while security concerns remain?
So I think that the Biden administration is going to approach China and U.S. foreign policy broadly from a fairly different perspective than the Trump administration. They have said that they are not going to start off by rolling back the tariffs that were put in place on China. Instead, they're going to hold and review them to see which ones are worth keeping. And if you'd listen to Biden throughout the campaign, in foreign policy speeches, in debates, he's been fairly clear that while he disagrees with how President Trump handled China, there wasn't so much disagreement with the need to take a more confrontational line than the U.S. had previously. I think what you're going to get both on foreign policy and domestic policy is just more of a return to normal policy priorities and normal policy-making processes. So rather than the president waking up in the morning and tweeting angrily about Xi Jinping, the National Security Council is going to have a more normal and deliberative process to produce policies that can be executed throughout the U.S. government. So you're going to get a more consistent set of policies. Whether those policies are going to be more cooperative or more confrontational with China, we'll still have to see. And some of that will depend on how China responds to the incoming Biden administration. Certainly, Trump burned a lot of America's bridges in Asia. How quickly will Biden be able to bring those back? Well, it'll depend on how quickly other countries are looking to build as well.
Jonathan Wachtel, Global Affairs Analyst from New York, also joining us. Jonathan, your sense, as I've been asking a lot of my panelists, is the world going to sleep a bit better from tonight?
You know, the world will sleep. I mean, we're dealing with, of course, this pandemic that is just such a wretched thing for our respective countries right now. But we're in an interesting place in which things have been shaken up to such an extent that there is a constructive way forward if things are handled in such a way. I mean, your country has been dealing with difficulties associated with China as well. And the very fact that President Trump was able to push things, and albeit it has been very choppy waters, as some of your guests have spoken about a short time ago, it did force the issue. It forced an issue that really needs to be grappled with. So I think to a certain extent, we will sleep a little more calmly, and there will be at least the ability to take these various things, re-examine the tariffs, look at the way forward, and come at it from a perspective that may not have been available to the Biden administration, had it's not been shaken up so extremely.
Just want to bring in SEEMA on as we see images of Kamala Harris walking through, the first woman vice president of the United States, the first with an Indian-American connection. SEEMA, how excited are Indian Americans about the prospect of Kamala Harris as Vice President of the United States? Or is the excitement more at times in India and in Tamil Nadu than it is in Washington?
No, there's plenty of excitement in the Indian American community. It's a very big deal. Today, the Washington Post had 2 extra supplements, one on Joe Biden and one on Kamala Harris. There were many articles that quoted Indian Americans. There is going to be a virtual sort of drawing the column, what we do outside the house in India. It's going to be digital. So there were a lot of contributions of design for that. And there is something called a Chitti Brigade that's forming, I believe, of all the Indian American aunties who want to, help her, help Kamala Harris sort of ease into the job. And if I might add on a personal note, she's going to be my neighbor. I'm just barely like a quarter mile from the vice presidential residence.
So you can probably, she might invite you for an idli dosa breakfast. I saw her on a video on YouTube make a pretty mean dosa, so you could have whatever else she does. Meanwhile, we want to cut into live pictures. Remember, the ceremony now starts in a couple of minutes from now. The formal ceremony starts in. There's Kamala Harris, who we've been just talking about at the moment. This is an extremely significant day. The first woman vice president of the United States. Dare I say, in this country, we had our first prime minister, woman prime minister 50 years ago. So the world's largest democracy, well ahead of the world's oldest democracy when it comes to women's representation at the very top. And remember, there are those who say that Joe Biden will at best be a one-time president. So there is every possibility that 4 years from now, Kamala Harris could well be running for president. She tried in 2004 20 as well, lost out and then became vice president. And she got a nice fist bump from Barack Obama there. Kamala Harris, quite a remarkable story, that of her and her family, her mother, who came to California and married a man of Jamaican origin, and the two of them then settled to life. And Kamala, in a sense, is a proud representative of the diversity that the United States takes such pride in. And her now ascending to this to the post of vice president, a major glass ceiling, in a sense, has been broken in the United States. So for Kamala Harris, this is a major moment. I know friends on WhatsApp who are telling us how they've campaigned for her in California in the past, have been involved in her in the Biden Kamala Harris ticket. And for a number of Indians who've settled in recent years in the United States, this is a magical moment, a moment where a woman with Indian origins has reached the second highest post in the United States. So really, this is a very special moment for the United States, and indeed for Kamala Harris in particular. Her views at times are seen as controversial, and I want to bring in from California, because you would know Stephen Golub, Kamala Harris's views at times seen as excessively liberal or libertarian. Will she have to change as vice president? Do you see Kamala Harris toning some of those views down, the sharp edges on some of the issues that she's had in the past, particularly that of race, which has been such a dominant undercurrent in this campaign?
Well, yeah, in some respects her views and policy positions as Senator, State Attorney General have been towards the liberal end of the spectrum. But on balance, she's been a fairly moderate politician. So there have always been things that her opponents could pick out and say, she did this, she said that. But she's also had some fairly moderate and even conservative positions on certain issues. There will be, unfortunately, by virtue of being a woman of color, there'll be some unfair criticism of her that a white man simply wouldn't get. That's unfortunately still the reality in America. But to turn that towards a much more positive perspective and to draw on what you had just said, what your previous guest was just talking about, Kamala Harris is kind of a one-person melting pot, a term that's used in a very positive sense here, of all the different ethnicities and even religions that make up the United States, and in some respects make it unique in a very positive way. A woman partly of Indian descent, and I think there'll be a lot more attention and awareness now of the great contributions that Indians and Indian Americans have made and are making to this country, but also Caribbean and Jamaican and African descent. Her husband and her stepchildren
I'm going to stop
Jewish.
you for a moment, Stephen, because we're getting now images coming in of Joe Biden and his wife coming through for the formal inauguration. Remember, Joe Biden at 78 becomes the oldest president of the United States, and he is someone who's gone through all the ups and downs of professional and personal life, but he's stuck the course. And many believe this is the second, or dare I say the third coming of Joe Biden. 1988, he had to give up his presidential challenge amidst charges of plagiarism. 2008, lost out in the Iowa caucus, and therefore couldn't really pursue his bid, became vice president, and now, just when everyone was writing him off, came back strongly in that US presidential campaign and appeared to be just the kind of person America wanted, almost a father figure at a time of a crisis. So there is Joe Biden. Let's just listen in to some of those sounds that are coming in at the moment from Washington, D.C. Ready for his big moment in the sun. Jonathan WACHTEL, what does it mean? A 78-year-old United States president, the oldest president, is he the right person at the right place at the right time in a way?
That's a big question, and I can assure you that the population in the United States would answer that very differently. So he's coming in. Of course, he has that patrician sense to himself. He, of course, has navigated the halls of Congress and then within the White House for decades. So he's a man of great experience when it comes to policy, when it comes to the runnings of government. So you could say that, yes, indeed, in terms of having a steward, someone who knows this space, he is certainly the right person to understand that. But, you know, this is such a terribly difficult time for this country, and we are going to immediately see, you know, we're all very excited to be seeing these beautiful pictures coming up, a ceremony of a lot of pomp and circumstances, and we're going to hear some rock stars and
that's right. Lady Gaga, I must tell you, Lady Gaga is scheduled to sing the national anthem. We've got Jennifer Lopez also expected to perform, but that's going to be one of the highlights, Lady Gaga singing the national anthem.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect of the United States, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. and Dr. Jill Biden. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
Now, on the podium where you have the U.S. President-elect Joe Biden with his wife Jill Biden, Kamala Harris and her husband, both of whom will be formally anointed by the Chief Justice of the United States
welcome the
as
Honorable
President
Amy Klobuchar
and Vice President of the United States.
Vice President Pence, Mr. President-elect, Madam Vice President-elect, members of Congress and the judicial branch, former presidents and first ladies, vice presidents, leaders from abroad, and a whole bunch of Bidens. America, welcome to the 59th presidential inauguration, where in just a few moments, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will take their solemn oaths. This ceremony is the culmination of 244 years of a democracy. It is the moment when leaders brought to this stage by the will of the people promised to be faithful to our Constitution, to cherish it and defend it. It is the moment when they become, as we all should be, guardians of our country. Have we become too jaded, too accustomed to the ritual of the passing of the torch of democracy to truly appreciate what a blessing and a privilege it is to witness this moment? I think not. 2 weeks ago, when an angry, violent mob staged an insurrection and desecrated this temple of our democracy, it awakened us to our responsibilities as Americans. This is the day when our democracy picks itself up, brushes off the dust, and does what America always does: goes forward as a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This conveyance of a sacred trust between our leaders and our people takes place in front of this shining Capitol dome for a reason. When Abraham Lincoln gave his first inaugural address in front of this Capitol, the dome was only partially constructed, braced by ropes of steel. He promised he would finish it. He was criticized for spending funds on it during the Civil War. To those critics, he replied, "If the people see the Capitol going on, it is a sign we intend the Union shall go on." And it did, and it will. Generations of Americans gave their lives to preserve our republic in this place. Great legislation to protect civil rights and economic security and lead the world was debated and crafted under this dome. Now it falls on all of us, not just the two leaders we are inaugurating today, to take up the torch of our democracy, not as a weapon of political arson, but as an instrument for good. We pledge today never to take our democracy for granted as we celebrate its remarkable strength. We celebrate its resilience, its grit. We celebrate the ordinary people doing extraordinary things for our nation, the doctors and nurses on the front line of this pandemic, the officers in the Capitol, a new generation never giving up hope for justice. We celebrate a new president, Joe Biden, who vows to restore the soul of America and cross the river of our divides to a higher plane. And we celebrate our first African American, first Asian American, and first woman Vice President, Kamala Harris, who stands on the shoulders of so many on this platform who have forged the way to this day. When she takes the oath of office, little girls and boys across the world will know that anything and everything is possible. And in the end, that is America, our democracy, a country of so much good. And today, on these Capitol steps and before this glorious field of flags, we rededicate ourselves to its cause. Thank you.